So there's a new bill making waves in Connecticut, HB 5468, and it's looking to really shake things up for homeschooling. Now, on the surface, it's about something called equivalent instruction, which sounds simple enough, but trust me, there's a lot more going on here.
Because the real question is this just a simple clarification of the rules, or is it actually creating a whole new regulatory system for families who homeschool? It really gets to the heart of a much bigger debate. Who has the final say over a child's education? Is it the parents, or is it the state?
Okay, so first things first. Let's dig into what the bill actually says it wants to do. And we're going to start with a key legal term that kind of reframes the whole conversation around homeschooling. And that term you're going to hear a lot is equivalent instruction. It's the official jargon for any education that happens outside of a typical public or private school. This is so important because this entire new proposed system is built around defining and regulating what equivalent instruction actually means. So how would this bill actually work in the real world? Well, it lays out a brand new, very formal process with some pretty specific hoops for homeschooling families to jump through.
You can really see here how it sets up this clear step-by-step process. First, parents would have to show up in person to register. Then they'd have to file forms every single year. And they'd have to provide proof, things like test scores or portfolios to show their child's education is up to snuff. They'd also have to hang on to all these records for years, just in case. And that final step? It essentially creates a state-run database to track every single homeschooled kid.
Now, while those new rules are a pretty big deal on their own, there's one part of this bill that has really set off alarm bells for parents and civil liberties groups.
And here it is. This is the big one. Under this bill, if you decide to pull your child out of public school to homeschool them, it would automatically trigger review by the Department of Children and Families. So you can't just start homeschooling right away. You'd have to wait until that government review is totally finished. What critics are saying is that this changes everything. It seems to transform homeschooling from a fundamental parental right into, well, a conditional privilege that the government has to sign off on. And yeah, that means the state could potentially just say no to a family's request to homeschool. As you can probably guess, people have some very strong and very different feelings about this bill. So let's break down the arguments from both the supporters and the critics.
On one hand, supporters of HB 5468 really see this as a way to protect kids. They argue it's necessary to make sure every child is getting a decent education, and importantly, that we don't miss potential warning signs of abuse or neglect. But on the other side, you have critics who say, hold on, we already have laws to deal with abuse. They see this bill as a massive overreach, creating a clunky bureaucracy that flips the script, turning a parental right into something you have to ask permission for.
This whole debate in Connecticut isn't really just about one bill. It taps into a huge, long-running constitutional question about the proper role of parents versus the government when it comes to raising a child.
And believe me, there's a ton of history here. For more than 100 years, the Supreme Court has pretty consistently sided with parents on this. We're talking about cases all the way back in the 1920s that struck down laws trying to limit educational freedom. And even as recently as the year 2000, the court was calling this one of our oldest fundamental rights. The legal precedent is definitely there.
And this line right here from that 1925 case, it's probably the most powerful and famous statement on the whole topic. The child is not the mere creature of the state. It just perfectly captures that core idea that children don't belong to the government, and the people who raise them, their parents, have the main right and responsibility to prepare them for their future.
So at the end of the day, why does this one bill in one state matter so much? Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture and what this all really means.
Look, no matter which side you're on, there's no question that HB 5468 would be a massive change for homeschooling in Connecticut. So for anyone who's interested in this, the best thing to do is to get involved directly. Read the bill for yourself, really understand it, and then be a part of the public process. Because laws like this one end up defining the relationship between families and the government for a long, long time. And that brings us right back to where we started, to that central question that the Supreme Court has been wrestling with for a century. When it comes to the upbringing and education of children, who's in the driver's seat? Is it the parents who raise them or the state that governs them? The fight over this bill is forcing everyone to confront that question head-on, all over again.